it's, you know, the AIDS crisis, as it was called back then, and people just didn't know what was going on. And
Dave showed me a bruise on his right leg. I had no idea what it was. I went to New York for an auction at Sotheby's, and afterwards I went with a friend of mine. We went, another dealer, we went down to Christopher Street and had dinner, and then we went for a drink at one of the bars. And there was a poster on the wall that said, a performance to raise money for gay cancer. And I said to him, what's gay cancer? He said, oh, it's a new cancer that's affecting young gay men. And I remember we both laughed because he said to me, oh, you and I are too old together. That was one of the myths. Well, also down in Times Square, there was a truck with a pastor on and a whole mob of people around. He was declaring on a microphone that gay cancer was the will of God to rid the world of homosexuals.
Yeah. Of course.
And so then I saw the very first documentary about it, and I started crying. I was in a cab going back uptown with my friend, and he said, what's the matter? I said, that's what Dave has. And so when I went back to London, I rang a friend of mine who was a nursing sister at the STD clinic in St Mary's, and I said, we must get Dave to be tested for this new virus. It was then called a virus.
I see.
Rock Hudson, who was a friend of mine, was dying in Paris, and he came out and he said he was gay. And I don't know how it happened, but overnight almost, it acquired a name. The virus acquired a name: human immune deficiency syndrome. Yeah. And then I cannot tell you what it was like. We got Dave to have the test, and the doctor said, you're positive to this new virus. And he said, does that mean I'm going to die? And the doctor said to him, I've never forgotten it because I was with him, and the doctor said, no, I can't predict that, but you have to get everything in order. And so I nursed him, and then eventually one day I took him for a blood test, and he suddenly went berserk. He started speaking absolute gibberish. I didn't know what it was. The doctor sedated him, and they said to me, we can only call this factor X. And so then the doctor told me to use the hospital as a hotel, to take Dave back there whenever it got too much stress. Well, I needed, now the overdraft at the gallery was £200,000 because I'd kept it closed, and I brought Dave home from the hospital. I needed someone to look after him, so I rang the Terence Higgins Trust, and they sent a buddy. Well, I didn't know it, but the buddy, Adam, was Buddy Adam Miles Jones, the journalist, and he wrote this terrible article about how jealous I was of blah blah. Anyway, I can say it now, and I couldn't say it then, but I took Dave back to the hospital on Christmas. He came, I brought him home for Christmas. I invited a few close friends. He had a catheter and a bag on a wheel, and I joked about it being made by Fendi, one of his favourite designers. And I took him back to hospital on Boxing Day. On New Year's Eve, I walked into the hospital and he was on an oxygen mask, and I took it off his face, and I said to him, Dave, I'm going to end it for you today. I promised him that I wouldn't let him suffer. We had friends who injected their lovers under the tongue with cocaine to kill them. And so he started, well, I went down to his doctor. No, actually, I can say this, I'll say it on camera for you. In a moment of absolute clarity, he said to me, aren't you glad we stopped having sex? I said, no. His eyes filled with tears, and they were the last words he ever spoke. Oh. I went down the hall, I found his doctor. I get very emotional about it, even now, after all these years. And I said, you have to help Dave out. and he was put on a morphine pump, and I sat there for 2 days while it hissed and venom going into him, and he started sitting bolt upright, and I picked up his pillow and I went to his doctor and I said, if you don't kill Dave today, I will. He said, you know what you're asking me to do? I said, look, I can do it. And he said to me, he had a little meeting with a couple of them. He said to me, come with me. They went down to Dave's ward, or his room, and he said, wait outside. I'd only there a few minutes, if that, and he called me in. He said, hold him. He'd been injected in the heart. He died in my arms. And so I became, then I helped with a young New Zealand psychologist. We set up the first AIDS training clinic in London to dispel the myths.
Because that was the terrible thing that I remember, is that, you know, there was a guy, I think he worked at Spotlight or something like that, and he, you know, went into work one day, he was gay, and all of a sudden he has his own mug with his name on it and separate from everybody else's. And he was on TV, and I just remembered and I was working in the insurance industry at that time as well, and it was just this absolute, you know, the fear that was put into people, the fear that was put into gay men, the fear that was in the community.
Oh, there was the fear was enormous. I remember, what I did was, I wrote my favourite quote of Goethe's in German on a piece of paper and rolled it up and put it in his hand. And it said, das Geheimnis der Liebe ist größer als das Geheimnis der Tod, which means the secret of love is greater than the secret of death. And the nurses washed him every day, and they didn't, they never took the note out of his hand. And so, as a thank you to them, I sent them each the note.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So, when you started the education facility, how much flack did you cop from that? Oh, people wouldn't have been accepting it all.
Do you know, Dave's mother wouldn't even drink a cup of tea in our flat. Good friends put their hands around the door and shook my hand and said, how are things? They wouldn't come in. It was unbelievable. But the nicest memory I have is Penny Lyon, who was principal dancer for me in O Calcutta and also some of my other productions. She brought her baby to the I rang her up and said, Dave's dying. And she brought her baby Jasmine. And Jasmine had been born prematurely. And she lowered Jasmine down to Dave and said, kiss Uncle Dave goodbye. And well, everyone was totally shocked.
Yeah, but we have come a long way. I mean, we have, you know, there still is the stigma out there. I don't think that'll ever go away. And I think it's the same like with cancer and things like that. You know, there are people out there that...
Well, I can remember the days when TB was spoken about in whisper.
But, you know, if somebody's homophobic, you generally find they're arachnophobic. They've got every phobia going on. But for you, I mean, you've had this amazing journey in life, and then this amazing tragedy. After that, was it back to Melbourne to sort of regroup, or
no? I stayed in London. Dave died in 1986. I stayed in London for 4 more years, and I'd lost the day Dave died. Dave died within. I flew home for my mother's. My mother was very frail and dying. And she said, why aren't you in London taking care of your Dave? I said, well, I came home to see you, Mum. She said, well, I think you'd better go. I'm going to go anyway tomorrow. Apparently, I didn't see it, but a young nurse accidentally knocked a drip out of her arm, my mother's arm, and my mother said no more and died. And so I got on a plane and went back to London to take care of Dave, of course.
But what an amazing mother, though, Noel, because she sounds like she totally accepted you, your sexuality.
Well, yes. I mean, my mother was Aboriginal. She was also a cripple as a child. There she was with my father, who was 25 years older than her, addicted to cocaine and a drunk. She became a drunk. We were abandoned, literally abandoned.
Yeah, it's sort of, you know...
And she never, as she got old, we became friends. Never mother-son, but we became very good friends.
Yeah.
And she blamed herself for everything that had happened. And so I tried to expiate that guilt, of course.
It's still amazing to say, you know, oh, you should be back with your Dave. I mean, that would have taken amazing strength from her. And, yeah, actually sort of, you know, choked me up a bit. In the 80s too, that when you came back to Australia, you would have noticed incredible differences. Like
I came back. I came back first of all to do The Boyfriend in 1968 with Sandy. Then I did it in South Africa during the apartheid. I was called into equity, and I was told in London that they didn't like their members going to South Africa because of apartheid. And I said, look, I explained my own black inheritance. And I said, I want to go, I want to experience it for myself. Little did I know what I was in for. Anyway, when I was there, of course, I was the hot shop director during the day. There was no category for Indigenous Australians, so I was an honorary white, which would stamp my passport. And at night I was smuggled out to Soweto, where I was inciting people to riot. I could have been thrown into jail.
Yeah. God, I mean, it's just remarkable. So where we're at now, Noel, you've come back to Australia. You've written one book.
I've written one. I've written Little Black Bastard, and I wrote that as a play, which I performed at the Edinburgh Festival, and I was nominated for the World Amnesty Award, and it's received various awards. And last year I received the Victorian Indigenous Performing Arts Award, and year 2010 I received the Also Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award.